Welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. My name is Matt, and I'm going to show you how I made this custom Man of Steel poster with my own initial in it. I use Photoshop and Illustrator in this. I'm using CS4, and it should be fine to use any previous version. I don't think that there's anything uniquely used that's not available in previous versions, even going back to CS7. The only really filter that I use is a lighting effect on it. But yeah, I'm going to show you how I made this. I'm just going to quickly walk through it with you. I'm not going to take you through it and create it with you just because this would probably be an hour-long video. And I want to kind of just quickly show you without taking too much of your time. If you would like to see starting from the ground up, going through it with me, I'd be happy to post another video about that. But I'm just going to kind of walk through this with you and kind of show you what I did, and hopefully from that you can learn how to create your own Man of Steel poster with your own initial inside of it. So let's go ahead and open Illustrator up. I've got the file that I used open right here. So I actually started with this file on a piece of paper. I sketched out an M and then brought it into Illustrator and kind of vectorized it and made some adjustments within the program. So just so you know, I started out with some sketches on paper because I really wanted that M to match the style of the S, and there wasn't any fonts I was able to find that I felt matched that. So you can kind of see some of my failed attempts here at creating an M, and you know, over here you can kind of see that just does not look at all like that Superman S. So yeah, I definitely went through some processes here to get to this point. So I'm going to show you what I used to get started. So obviously there's the main M here that's going to be on top of the final logo, but that's not what I actually created, which is the M here. All right, now it's merged together with the border, which is also right here. I'll just give it a darker color to see it better, which is, yeah, what you see right here, the border. And I got that by tracing the original Man of Steel poster. And if you notice, there's a little bit of bulging along these edges, and I wanted to capture that. So I traced this using the pen tool, made the the inside and outside curves, and then I just merged it with my vectorized tracing on paper here, so I got this single piece. And then after that, I just used a 3D bevel or extrude and bevel, and got these pieces here, which we will use for the glowing red metal in the center that's right here, these parts right here. So just those two things, just that I created it in Illustrator with a sketch, and then I used a bevel to give me some additional vector pieces to give me that 3D look. So once I was down here, we bring that into Photoshop. Each vector has its own layer. I'm sure you already know that. But here's the actual file in Photoshop with all the various layers that I have. It's pretty simple. I didn't use very many filters or processing. It's pretty much just textures and vectors that I compiled, and using various, pretty much just blending modes and various things. So yeah, let me show you what I did. I made this, just so you know, this file is made to be able to be printed because I thought it'd be cool. I work and print pretty frequently, so creating a very large document was no problem, and I actually wanted to do that so that if I made this something I like, because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I just saw the poster and thought, man, that'd be really cool if I could recreate that and make it with my own initial and still keep that Man of Steel effect. I thought that would be really cool. I didn't know if I would be able to do it, but I did, as you can see here. So I started in a print resolution just in case if I made it. So I'll start with the background. I started with just a concrete texture here. Pretty much any concrete texture you want, you could find. Just doing an image search, if you want to make it print, you want to make sure it's pretty big. This document size is 2700 by 3200 pixels, so it's decent size. And so keep that in mind when you're looking for your textures, what size your document is, because if you do work with small file sizes and you have a large document, it's going to look pretty blurred when you zoom in. or pixelated. So from this texture, I wanted to add some lighting effects to it to give it some more direction, because that texture to me, I felt, was very flat. And while that would have worked and achieved the look, I like to give my illustrations, graphics, designs some depth to them, and I usually do that by adding some sort of lighting into it. So what I did was I duplicated this texture onto a new layer and also copied it and put it into an alpha channel here, which you can see, which basically I just applied a levels or a curves adjustment to it to really pull the highs and lows and really get that contrast into the image. Once that was done with the copied texture layer, I just went up to filter, render, lighting effects, and just made sure that the texture channel was set to that alpha, and then I just adjusted the light source for how I felt I wanted. In this case, it was coming from the top down. Once that was applied, I'll show you what that result was. That's what I this is what I got when I was finished. I felt that was way too much of that lighting effect, so since it was duplicated and it was, you know, in the same position, I just reduced the opacity till I felt like it was at a good point that gave me some additional depth into the image. So you can see how it's just very minor, but it does give you a more sense of depth to it. So once that was done, you know, just going in color, adjusting it to that blue in the background, which was just a color fill here, set to overlay, and that you can see the blue value here is 0772 AB, and it's set to overlay at an opacity of 50%. And then I just applied a curves level to reduce the brightness, give it a kind of nighttime feel, and that was set to darken. I don't know why much it was darkened. Maybe I just liked the look of it. Yeah, I think I just liked the look of it. It kind of didn't kind of reduce the contrast, I felt. Okay, so from there, I actually, if I remember right, I did import, you know, these files here and kind of set them up to kind of get started. I didn't, you know, it doesn't ever work that way going from the bottom up. So yeah, I just brought these files in and gave them a maroon tint, which that color number is 451717. Any maroon color would work. In fact, if you wanted to make a different color, hey, cool. Whichever you liked, but that's what I decided to do. Once those were in, I did give them a gradient overlay, and I just set that to a black and white, opacity 50%, blend mode to overlay, and I gave it a slight bevel and emboss, and the light source is pretty much coming from the top down just to give it a little highlight on the edges. And yeah, drop shadow, which, because this is the top M, just to give it more distinction between that there is a additionally raised part of the logo. Yeah, pretty basic. And then from there, I just applied a copy, or not applied a copy, applied a texture to each of the vectors. And this texture, which I probably would be kind of hard to show you, basically I did the lighting effect that I did to the background to that texture, which is this alpha channel right here. So I copied the texture that was just kind of a rough concrete look, and then I copied it into an alpha channel, adjusted its levels here so you could see I can get some ridges and high up and downs for when I applied the lighting effect. And I applied it to that to give it the effect that you see here, the highlights and shadows. It's kind of a little bit much, I think, but so is also the image, the original poster, the Man of Steel. It's very contrasty, very rough. And so then I just duplicated that texture down to it. I put a clipping mask onto it, which basically just clips it to the vector mask right here. And on this one, I actually shifted the actual texture. So I copied it down, applied the clipping mask, and just used my pen tool and just slightly offset it just a little bit, not very much, but you can see that line, it follows right through. This kind of almost matches it, and this just ever so slightly. Once I had that done, then I needed to add the lighting and kind of look like it was actually part of the background. So I copied, oops, I'm going to show you a little too much. I copied, I guess one of those has to be open. I copied the vector and just set its fill to 0 and put in the drop shadow. And the reason I did that was because this layer effect already had, I think, the drop shadow, but I also wanted to kind of control the shadow more, and that's why I have two different copies, because if you look in the original image, that's not it, there's a slight glow to it as if it's emanating light, and that would mean that in the shadow is going to be tinted because it's, you know, glowing, emanating light. The shadows are going to be tinted to a certain color, and while you probably could have achieved that in other ways, as there is 100 ways to do everything in Photoshop and Illustrator, I chose just by duplicating this layer and creating a drop shadow and changing it to multiply versus the other layer, which was a drop shadow set to the blend mode color burn. And I think it's just a very subtle red color, because when you're working with the color burn or the color dodge modes, you really don't need a lot of color to influence the pixels beneath that. So that gave me the color. See, if I remove it, it's very, it's almost not there. And whereas that's there. And if I remove this, you can see it's very, it almost basically increases the contrast too much, but it also does what I wanted to do, which was increasing the color behind the pixels. So I just did two copies just to give me the shadow effect that I wanted. And that won't really show up until once we apply this orange light. So this was just a gradient with a very light color orange selected, and then just clicking from the center out and dragging, and then it just brought down its opacity pretty much. The other thing here is this explosion dust, because if you look in the original Man of Steel graphic, which I don't have to look at, but if you look at it, the logo looks as if it came flying down and just pounded itself into the cement, and there's just a little bit of like an explosion or dust around that shooting outward from the logo. So this here is my attempt at trying to do that, which I basically found a texture that was a paint splatter, and then just used the liquify tool to kind of pull it out like this. You see here, tinted it to an orange, and then just set it blending mode to multiply, because I wanted to keep that orange, that light effect in the middle, and kind of the outside kind of almost adding a vignette automatically to it. Apart from that, you want to add the center lighting effect here, which basically, I'm trying to think how I got that shape. I think I selected this as my selection and then just removed that, and then grabbed my gradient tool and applied it out just like that. Pretty simple. And then set its blending mode to screen to knock out all the black. Probably could have done it a different way, but that's just how I did it at the time. Second thing I wanted to show you, second thing, lots of things I'm showing you. The next thing I wanted to show you is the bevel, the kind of glowing orange red metal on the inside of the logo here, which, if you remember, I got that from doing a bevel on this vector file here, and making sure that when I did that, extrude and bevel, there's an option you have to have selected so that it will output that to the actual files. Maybe not actually. I think you just, I think when you just do it, you click OK, it does it, and then you have to go up to Object, Expand Appearance, and then it'll actually do that for you. And when you ungroup it, you can select the pieces. You might have to ungroup it a few times. So that's how I got those pieces, that 3D effect. But apart from that, once it's in there, I'll show you that orange color. It's FE823F, just a light orange. Several colors would work. If you can see, I'm adjusting the color live, and you can just kind of see how it changes. Oh, blue. Adding the lighting, I just created a crippling mask, grabbed my brush tool, and then pressing D to set it to my default black and white, I just went through and made sure that the hardness was set at 0, and whatever size pixel I felt was right, and I just painted a highlights here, highlights there, highlight down there, and then same thing with shadows. You know, just kind of painted it in by hand. And again, that's just nothing special, just straight pixels or transparency. And then just applied the 2 textures on top. And you just want to find some kind of a grunge texture. This was set to screen because I think if I do normal, yeah, that doesn't really look at all like it. Yeah, and if you want, I'd be more than willing to put together these textures that I've used within this and the fonts as well, so that you could kind of try and recreate it if you wanted. I know it can kind of take some time sometimes to find the right exact textures, and it's just convenient. But yeah, if that's something that you'd be interested in, please leave a comment saying that you'd like to have a file to download with these texture files so you could follow along. I'd be happy to do that for you. But yeah, as you can see, that's how I was able to create my own Man of Steel Custom M poster. I hope you found this very helpful and you were able to kind of make sense of it. I know it's pretty short, but yeah, that's it. I'll show you really quickly what font I used, which basically I think is Guile Sans. Yeah, Guile Sans. It's a very close match to the original font within the Man of Steel. And I just applied a gradient overlay to it and a drop shadow just ever so slightly. And yeah, that's it. I hope, like I said, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. There's plenty more to come. I've got a lot more awesome tutorials for you. And if you would like to see more step-by-step, kind of go along with me from the ground up, I'd be happy to make another video. It's just that video would be a lot longer than what even this video is, just kind of showing you what I did. But I'd be happy to do that. Please leave some comments for me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.